13th of June, a Tuesday, and I am here with the other Kevin Hoare. That is
Oh,
sometimes he's often also known as Do Not Comply, or We Were Right All Along about J6, or also the intrepid David Darnell. David, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How
Well,
are you?
oh, you know, rolling with the punches. Lots of
There we
punches,
go.
lots
I
of rolling.
fixed my name, Kevin.
The other Kevin Hoare.
Kevin Horror, the other.
Well, I'll take that as a high compliment, actually.
See, I keep your name there in case I say anything really stupid, and that way people look. You know what that Kevin Horror said?
I'm pretty sure he said it. Both of them did, actually. So yeah, I've
That
been
Kevin
encountering more
Horror.
Kevins lately too. It just seems like we're everywhere, and in so many places I don't even realize it. But
There's a lot of Kevins, a lot of Davids, a lot of Kevins.
a lot of Davids, a lot of Kevins. Although Kevin used to be less common because when I was in high school, there were two of us out of like about 80 kids in my class, and now you probably find maybe 10 or something, just something crazy at this point. I don't know. It just became popular, and then some nutcases thought it'd be a great idea, and that's all she wrote. But
Yeah.
um, but look, I don't mind it. I kind of like actually having have that name be normalized, because you know what name's never going to be normalized? Joe Biden. That guy. And Tina Kotek, never normalized. Sorry, not happening. Um, they are both, well, and Shamia Fagan for that matter, not going to be normalized. Not soon. There's nothing normal.
Yeah, I think she's looking at a career change, I think.
Yeah, I think she's looking at a new venue to live in, actually. And but you know what? I wonder who's going to cover the cost of her pet care when she is engaging in that. That's the thing. Actually, why don't we start out with that story? I made an agenda, but I'm immediately going to throw it out and talk about whatever we want, and then we'll skip around. How's that sound? Because I
Sure.
want to start out with Shamia Fagan, the story that taxpayers are getting billed with Shamia Fagan's pet hotel fees. This is the recently resigned Secretary of State Shamia Fagan, beneficiary of lots of drug money, and was working for an entity that apparently not compatible with being Secretary of State, or at least that's what she decided.
Are you
And
talking about? Are you talking about the state of Oregon? That entity?
yeah, that's right. Or being in a government position. But the Oregonian is reporting that Shamia Fagan's extensive travels, that she billed taxpayers for um, uh, her dog pet hotel fees, and she double billed the state of Oregon and her campaign pack for many of these same expenses, including airfare, hotel, food. Just a real money making opportunity, I guess, unless you get
So
caught.
you're saying that she billed the same expenses to more than one entity, so to speak?
Yeah, and one of them was a political action committee, which the last time I checked, not a whole lot of legitimate campaign expenses involve pet hotels. Um, I mean, unless the dog was canvassing the pet hotel, because of course in the state of Oregon with the Secretary of State like Shamia Fagan, maybe the dogs are voting, and they just needed someone to come knock their kennel door and get them to get that ballot in.
Yeah.
Woof woof. You
Well,
know,
maybe they're drug dogs.
bird dogs. There we go. Yeah. Well, and
Sniffing out drugs for clients.
yeah, and she was. They kind of detail all the stuff that she did during 2022, which is quite a list, actually. She went to the National Lieutenant Governors Association, the Hunt Institute Leadership Event, Texas A&M University to lecture students about voting rights. Yep, I'll bet that's what she did. Democrat Lieutenant Governors Association. And then, of course, on April 9th, 2022, the White House Easter egg roll, just to name a few. She also went to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow.
Wow.
And it cost Oregon taxpayers $18,000, including two $500 a night rooms in a 5-star London hotel that no one else used. So none of the people that were from Oregon that were going to this used that particular hotel. She traveled along with staff members, security personnel to a conference in November of 21, along with governors from 5 other states, all part of the U.S. Oh, that was Kate Brown. Sorry, that was Kate Brown that went to that. But they're kind of comparing her to Kate Brown's freewheeling spending. So that U.S. Climate Alliance, the group formed after Donald Trump changed climate policy goals. So Kate Brown used to bill people for that. Shemia Fagan is following the great tradition of sticking taxpayers with exorbitant fees for travel junkets that have nothing to do with doing their job. Not really. And
yeah. Well, it's a good thing the state of Oregon is flush with taxpayer money, because otherwise she'd have to stay in a $200 a night hotel instead of a $500 a night hotel in London or whoever that was.
Which would be an absolute crisis. And the campaign coffers that help them all do things like get elected and win governorships, and which were only a couple percentage point difference between Kotek and Drazen, and then of course the state legislative races, which we talked about last night on the show with state senators Bonham and Thatcher. They were won by only a few thousand votes statewide.
3,000 something, 3,000 or 4,000, something like that.
That's right, cumulatively between multiple races.
Right.
There could have easily been a 15-15 tie in the Senate with just a couple of very small changes in races. And they managed to pull this off, apparently, in part by getting what now looks like a $500,000 loan that they lied about. It was actually a donation from FTX executive Nishad Singh. So they could send mailers attacking Republican candidate Christine Drazen, among others. And they just intentionally misidentified the donor.
Are they calling that a loan now, Kevin? I guess
I called it a loan because they are giving it back.
They have to give the money back. I guess it is kind of a loan. I mean, did they give it back to people that were scammed out of that, or what?
They don't.
Well, no, they don't have to, but they're getting a lot of pressure, right?
Well, the guy who made the donation apparently is doing something like pleading guilty to some fraud charges in connection with the whole cryptocurrency FTX exchange collapse. And, that $33 billion crypto exchange went kaplooey, but not after it donated millions of dollars to Democrats across the country and a cool $500,000 with a month left in the election last fall, so that they can do what I think can only be termed as stealing an election. Because if it was a loan and they're returning it without interest, and they had to pay a mere $15,000 fine, courtesy of my former counterpart at the Democrat Party of Oregon, Molly Woon, former communications director, who apparently got promoted into the role of overseeing election scandals, and she knew all about them, actually. So now this whole thing is starting to, because they weren't going to return it. They weren't going to return it because they didn't have the money. But now they're going to return it because they say here, this resolution will fully account for these donations by ensuring the funds go to where they belong, to federal law enforcement officials working to achieve justice in this case. So what happened is the feds started sniffing around. They're not only going after Fagan, but they're looking at everybody who got these money flows from the Sam Bankman-Fried cryptocurrency thing. And these guys are starting to feel the heat, and they're returning the money only now. Not when this story first came out, not when they realized that they had lied about the donor. None of that. only once the feds started investigating who said what to whom, and they actually now are saying, that these records show, this is the Oregonian yesterday, or no, today, saying that Senator Ron Wyden's campaign was actually looped in on the $500,000 donation from FTX executive to Oregon Democrats. That's what the records show.
Really?
He had a staffer that worked for him that was helping
Did he get 10% for the big guy?
Yeah, no kidding. The culture
of corruption, the mummy of the Oregon Democrat Party.
No, that's exactly it. And so, they announced they're returning it, but you don't get to say, well, if you go rob a bank, you don't go and just return money to the bank and then say, I think we made good on the funds that we ill-gotten gain from the bank, and we're just going to move on because now everything is good. And so I think they must know that there's more to this and that they're all in deep doo-doo. And $500,000, that's a lot of money for federal campaigns. A state campaign, that's an enormous sum, especially late in the campaign.
Yeah.
It's enough to win.
Yeah, it makes a difference. It makes a difference, and that was a tight race with a third candidate in there, and who knows if that was the deciding factor.
They did say that they used the funds to attack Drazen, send mail pieces out and stuff, which the state party is certainly legally allowed to do.
Right.
But I think we're just at the beginning of this, unless they're trying to make it go away. Which, how much would that surprise anyone at this point?
Yeah. Well, there's apparently quite a corrupt web of money. Well, I think Patty said it. Somebody said it in the comments. Money laundering going on in the state of Oregon, in regards to Oregon Democrats, and I do hope, and I don't know if there's any will for it, at least within the state. Perhaps the feds will pursue it, but I do hope that it's investigated deeply, because I'm sure these are drop in the bucket amounts to what's probably really being passed around.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that they've got bags of cash that were being given to people just says,
that's kind of a bad look, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't look good, and it just says, well, these are the bags of cash you found. And we reported.
Right.
You don't know about the bags of cash that nobody knows what happened to those. And
right. Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point. We've discussed it on this show more than once, that it seems to me that the Democrat agenda in Oregon seems to be catering to a particular clientele, and it's not the people of the state of Oregon.
No, it definitely is some kind of, but it's even corrupt special interests. Like, you could get above the board donations from some of the fairly well-to-do special interests in this state, like the Oregon Education Association or the trial lawyers or you name it, right? But they had to go for bags of cash because
from drug dealers out of Florida.
Exactly, an all cash business. This is just, I just think that the fact that the media is sort of giving it scant mention. I will give the Oregonian a little bit of credit. They also said that the Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, who recused herself from looking into this case, just when you need an above the board, honest, straight shooter Attorney General to look into something, she has to recuse herself.
Right.
And they say Rosenblum's recusal, while merited, is both ridiculously late and deeply inadequate to ensure the independence that this inquiry deserves. So in other words, everything that was happening in the inquiry up until it hit the headlines, she was overseeing. So you really can't trust that anymore. And that's the Oregonian calling her out. It's not a right-wing conspiracy rag or something like that. We didn't invent this on the captive audience,
Yeah. Well, I mean, she was getting the money too, right?
And she gave $150,000 to the Oregon Democrat Party that she just had sitting around in her coffers. So, it is. You're right. This is probably just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to take a while for this to unfold. We'll see if we find out where it ends. Now, shifting gears to what's happening here in Oregon, we talked a lot with the state senators last night about the state Senate walkout, and it continues. There was an offer floated apparently by the Democrats that was under consideration yesterday, and I believe this morning. From what I understand, nothing has been agreed to or accepted by Republicans, and I think they said nearly 10 hours of negotiations took place over the weekend. But all these like warm, fuzzy noises made by Kotek and others saying that they're close to a deal. But one of the details that leaked, Dirk Vanderhart with OPB, the article that he wrote says Democrats considering watering down abortion and gun safety bills in order to get Oregon Senate Democrats to return.
Gun safety bills.
Yeah. So they won't even tell the truth about what the damn bills are.
Nobody's telling the truth about it. Nobody's saying that it's the child sex trafficker assistance bill.
That's right.
That's the truth.
The minor mutilation bill, the parental rights cancellation bill. There's just all these names which are better, more accurate, but the media can't even begin to bring themselves to call it that. They just, Dirk, fine, but you're a better reporter than this. Why don't you just like come up with something neutral instead of calling it what the Democrat leadership has told you to call it? Call it something honest so that we can all actually know what it's about.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that a deal even needs to be made, to be honest with you, Kevin. I mean, they can run the session out. If a budget needs to be passed, a special session can be called. Personally, I think they should just run the clock out on this thing, because I have a pretty good feeling that any deal that Republicans get is not going to be a good deal.
No, I think we're going to be handed some crumbs, and then they're going to come in and pound us down, and they're actually going to double cross us, because
they will.
Why would they be doing some of the things they're doing in the House right now with bills that are going to wander across that aisle as soon as they return? One of them was a bill to rewrite and essentially gut the building codes. They call them the reach codes, so they can reach for clean energy. It's a 112-page amendment to House Bill 3409 that literally said almost nothing, and then they gut and stuffed it and stuck in there something so gigantic that there's just no way we'll even have public hearings or scrutiny on it, to rewrite all the building codes so that they can make banning natural gas really easy everywhere in the state. A wildly unpopular idea, by the way, with voters who don't know this is happening and probably won't know until they're told, nope, you can't buy that. Sorry.
Well, that's why they're using that 112-page amendment and the gut and stuff to authorize agencies to make these rules, because they know they can't pass them without suffering, either at the ballot box or in other ways.
Yeah, and I also think that at this point, the Democrats have said that they're not negotiating away anything on House Bill 2002 or 2005. They're not going to negotiate anything away, but then they're going to keep making a bunch of noises like some deal is close. And I don't know why a deal would even be close, but KATU reports that Wagner, Rob Wag his finger at you, did not take roll on the Senate floor on Monday, thus preventing fines from being imposed on absent Republican senators. So it's just sort of like, they've stopped the beatings for one day, and they're thinking, we'll get these guys to believe that if they come back, the beatings will stop. And it's not going to stop.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, they're doing the right thing. Senate Republicans are doing the right thing, and I'm glad they are.
And Senator Linthicum actually put out a pretty good argument for standing firm against the violations done by Wagner, and to draw out the things that are actually being done. There's some pretty good arguments here. We talked about it last night on the show that they've really cut down on public participation in the hearing and bill scrutiny process. And he gives a specific example of how this is done. They, of course, have made the language of the bill summaries almost incomprehensible to regular folks, much less eighth graders as required by law.
Right.
Partisan testimony, time constraints. So they just cut down, make sure that no one, they bring in all of these people, they stack it with people that testify, and then they say, well, we don't have enough time. So what we're going to do is only let people who drove 7 or 8 hours to come testify against the bill. We're going to give them 2 minutes, and that's it. Even well, legislators go down and testify against bills. They get 2 minutes.
They do.
2 minutes. Yeah.
Well, agencies hire lobbyists to testify on their behalf.
That's right.
State agencies hire lobbyists to go lobby the legislature for their wants and desires.
Utterly conflict of interest situation that they're spending the money we gave them to push the people to give them more money and less constraint on what they do. And they also refuse to hear expert testimony. There's an example given here of a PhD from Montana who came to speak on, I believe it was House Bill 2002. And he's an expert on gender reassignment surgeries and the effect it has on suicide rates. They gave him 2 minutes. Came from Montana. This is the one that we didn't talk about last night, but I've gotten more details on it since. They've been taking nonpartisan staff, particularly the staff that are in the legislative fiscal office and the LPRO that goes and writes all the bills. The ones who write the bills that can't be understood by eighth graders by law, but they've declared themselves in compliance with that law, or just in no need of complying with it. And these guys have been turned into very partisan weapons. You go and you expect a bill to be rewritten differently based on an agreement made, comes back, not written that way. That any committee measure or amendment not be treated confidentially. That's a violation of a Senate rule. And yet Rob Wagner lets them do all this stuff, circumventing the rules, circumventing the law, which there's something so deeply flawed with the process. I don't know why he would come back in order to sanctify a process that's this bad. And they're not getting reforms out of this. They even had a bill, Senate Bill 393. It passed out of a committee with no public hearing. Just like, we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the way they've become. I mean, you remember when they shut down the Capitol, locked the doors in 2020 or 2021 or whatever it was, 2020, I guess. And wouldn't allow anybody in to do anything, and you could watch a TV monitor on the outside of the building. I think it's something like that, and they don't care about the process. They don't care about what is enshrined in the Oregon Constitution and concerning the way the process is supposed to be conducted. They're absolutely 100% concerned with just passing their agenda. And some of it, as you have pointed out and others have pointed out, is just way out in left field.
Yeah. And they point out here that they also don't really care about the people represented by the Republicans in the legislature. Republicans and the one independent, Brian Boquist, they represent nearly 2 million Oregonians and roughly 90% of Oregon's natural resource lands. But Republicans tried to bring 75 bills to the floor for consideration, and Wagner led his caucus in voting no on each one of these discussions. That's not even close to good faith bipartisanship.
No, it's not.
Which they campaign on. Democrats talk about, we're going to come together. We need to unite.
Oh hell, when they do a press release for any bill, it's a bipartisan bill. Regardless of anybody, if even a single Republican signs on to it, it's all spin. It's just there's no truth in it. And unfortunately, and we've had this discussion many times on this show, is most people just don't know that.
They don't know. No, they don't really know what's happening, and we have a dysfunctional media that makes no effort to help them understand. And now the media, I think, is even the Associated Press, the news service. One of the people writing for it, I saw this article. It's here's the title of it, and it showed up once on the Hill, and then I noticed Associated Press. It showed up in like a dozen publications, as you might expect. Political collateral ? Oregon GOP walkout on abortion. Trans health bill threatens school funds.
Trans health.
Yep. They're unhealthy until we actually pass this bill, and then they're healthy. And so, but the spin here is that the school funds are threatened by the fact that we've walked out on these two bills, which we walked out on a lot more than that. We just listed the things that they were doing to abuse the process and frankly make it so that the public is even able to have input on these bills. They spin it as abortion and trans health, and then they turn around the 3-bank shot. They're saying it threatens school funds, which is fascinating because then I found this article, which is in the Oregon Capital Chronicle, saying districts are juggling options as state budget delayed. Their districts are moving ahead on their budgets based on proposed spending. So, in other words, it's BS. Like this other article comes out nearly the same day, and it negates the Associated Press article, at least in terms of the fear or the threat, right? And this article says, no, they can get by. They're just going to assume they're going to get the money. Well, fine. Then there's no harm here. So why don't we just keep going? And the worst part of it of all is Democrats control the entire agenda of what comes in front of anybody. Any committee comes to the floor, all of it.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who decided not to bring any budget forward anytime soon. They're the ones who decided to push that all the way to the end and put it at risk if something like this were to happen. And they're the ones who decided to move these two bills in the way they did, with the content that they did, HB 2002 and HB 2005, to kind of force the issue. Therefore, actually, this article doesn't say it, but it's 100% the fault of the Democrats for not proceeding on the important priorities they say are all jeopardized now. I don't feel a single ounce of concern for the people who say they are threatened by the shutdown. How about running things better?
Yeah, well, they're 100% totally responsible for everything that's going on down there. They have all the marbles. They control everything down there. So to try to spin this politically and put it on Republicans is, of course, disingenuous, and they are, of course, disingenuous, intellectually dishonest spin masters, because it's all about politics. It's all about getting reelected. It's all about maintaining power, and it just doesn't seem to be the slightest bit of concern for what is good for the people who are paying their salary.
Yeah, and here's something they could have hearings on. All of the methods of reading that are being taught. There's a special report by the Oregon Capital Chronicle. No friend of Republicans. Just there's a reporter who has actually written a story about this, saying that Oregon fails to turn the page on reading using flawed teaching methods. Oregon's 15 educator preparation programs offer vastly different reading instruction methods to future teachers, and some teach flawed methods. If you had a real legislature, they'd actually do something about this when they decide they're going to give money. Is like, well, stop funding failure. but they don't care because it's all about the dollar figures and blaming Republicans who didn't cause this to happen. We didn't cause this to happen. We'd have been more than happy to have hearings about this. They didn't do anything.
No. No, I mean, Republicans have never put language in a bill that says if you don't have tampon dispensers in the boys' bathroom, you might not get your school funding.
By the way, I was visiting University of Oregon last week to drop in on the College Republicans. Actually, it was their last meeting for the year, and I just came in.
Both of them?
Oh, well, more than that, but it's not a giant group, but it's also like the end of the year when people are just not that focused on it. But I said I'd come down. Good bunch of kids. And as I was leaving, I made a stop at the restroom afterwards, and I looked and I'm like, yep, that is a tampon dispenser prominently displayed on the wall in the men's room. So I just
the bathroom with urinals.
Yeah, exactly. I know we could actually really come up with some interesting terms that just like chest feeding. There's going to be something that we can come up with describing urinals.
Yeah. Well, they're bigoted, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Urinals are discriminatory, and they're actually racist too. By the way, they're white.
They're a symbol of hate. Yeah, they're white and they're a symbol of hate.
Exactly, a symbol of hate. See some guy trying to beat up a urinal, like, man, you're so racist. Well, I guess it just, since we talked about University of Oregon, we can't leave the Beavers out of this one, because Oregon State has distinguished itself this past a few days by being a place that children can go and be exposed to a bizarre nude performance, an all-age nude performance of men in drag, or whatever they think they are, whatever gender they've decided to describe themselves as. Underage children were exposed to adult nudity at a recent drag show at Oregon State University's LaSalle Stewart Center, hosted by student fee-funded campus LGBT group Rainbow Continuum on June 2nd. And this has now made it into the national news. Funny how this hasn't made it into the local news. Have you noticed that? It had to go to the Arizona.
I have not seen it in local news.
Yeah, it says the drag performance, called Illegal Drag Show, openly encouraged LGBTQ members to be gay and do crime. And then an Instagram post to advertise the event, all ages, alongside a note that it would contain adult themes, which, of course, adults of all ages, including toddlers, right? Adults who are toddlers, apparently. And the student, they were called out by Campus Reform, and somebody who's the president of the Oregon State Students for Life, Rebecca Long, said the show consisted of extremely explicit sexual content, including sexually provocative performances by men and women in drag and costumes. And there's a video here that you can watch on the. Did I paste the link in here? Let me go ahead and do that. Yeah, I did. So anybody watching can go and watch this for themselves. In exclusive footage, one performer who appears to be a biological woman fully exposes her breast for the audience by stripping off all her upper body clothing. The performer then tries to hold various objects under them, such as a wooden sword and 5-pound weights. How entertaining. Footage shows the individual eventually bringing out a ladder as a trans mask, MASC, associate joins her to assist with the, quote, titty weightlifting, unquote, feat. Footage also shows one of the drag queens leading a child on stage to be interviewed in front of a cheering audience. As the performer interviews, the child responds to a question with, "He's a full-grown man." Well, that child is going to have to be canceled. Doesn't respect gender and pronouns. And the children were present without a content warning or regard for their innocence and age, Campus Reform said. And they added that they were subject to a sexual display that not only included references but physical moves and sexually explicit dances by both biological men and women, and extreme nudity as well. So, that's Oregon State. That is your tax
Man,
dollar.
I remember a time on the Oregon State campus when guys like that would get their ass kicked.
Yeah, well, now anybody who would even speak up and criticize it could find themselves arrested or expelled or various other forms of sanction.
Well, they really need their ass kicked, as far as I'm concerned.
Anything like that being done to kids, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a time not too long ago when you could get hurt, seriously hurt, or maybe even disappear when you mess around with people's kids like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to our society, but man, if you'd done that to any of my kids when they were little, one of us would go to the hospital and one of us would go to jail, and I wouldn't care which one I was. So,
yeah, and also parents that would authorize or enable kids to attend such a thing.
Oh God, yeah.
They wouldn't get to be parents for very long at some point, right?
They wouldn't. No. I mean, that was considered child abuse. Apparently it's no longer child abuse. I don't even know what the hell child abuse is anymore. I mean, as far as the state is concerned, they don't seem to have a handle on it. Passing these laws that, seem to enable the abuse of children. But yeah, that's hard to believe, man. OSU used to be such a good redneck ag school.
Well, child abuse nowadays is taking a kid's iPhone away, or denying them gender mutilation surgery because they want it. That's child abuse. That's what the definition is. I just wanted to help you with that because things changed if you didn't catch the memo on that one. Well, from child abuse, now we go to elder abuse, and President Brandon. Apparently, this has come out in the last day or so. The Burisma boss, that's the corrupt Ukrainian energy company that was wrapped in there with the Bidens, gave Hunter a job.
Yeah.
A job. Actually, he was on the board of Burisma, though he has no energy experience, no qualifications, but he was getting like $80,000 or something a month.
Yeah.
And
pretty good gig.
But it turns out that not only is there that memo from 2017 that confirmed that there was an investigation into a pay-to-play scheme involving both Hunter and the then former Vice President Joe Biden, but also that the Burisma boss says he has 15 taped conversations with Hunter and Joe, two conversations with Joe discussing the bribe scheme. So I say release the tapes. This could be really big if these are truly released. Now I'll wait until it actually happens. But Chuck Grassley, Senator from Iowa, is the one who revealed this claim on a Senate floor speech after Christopher Wray last week allowed the House Oversight Committee members to see a redacted informant file, the one that I was just referring to, that claimed the Hunter and then Vice President received $5 million apiece to serve the interests of Burisma Holdings owner Mykola Zlochevsky, which is interesting because this is the same company that Joe Biden, whose son was working for, and who a prosecutor in Ukraine opened an investigation of. Joe bragged that he told them, you better fire that guy or you don't get any more money from the United States. And they did. And he bragged that he did it. Right. And then all President Trump did is apparently prevail on the then and current president of Ukraine to take it seriously what was going on and perhaps get to the bottom of this. Like, what really happened in your country? Did someone in your country bribe the former vice president? And what did Democrats do? That was impeachment number one. Isn't it funny how every passing year, President Trump looks more right than even President Trump said he was?
Yeah. Well, we now live in a country, or now citizens of a country, Kevin, that in which the ruling political party currently in power arrests the opposition. So my question is, where are the bananas?
Yeah, the banana republic that we're in.
Yeah.
I mean, is probably experiencing inflation and supply chain problems at the hands of one Joseph R. Biden. But it looks like between Grassley and Comer, they're starting to pursue this. And on top of that, as we've seen today, so President Trump was he was arraigned in federal court in Miami for these 37 charges that have been filed against him, which I think 31 of them are like the same thing over and over about just 31 documents, right? And then the rest of the charges are all these things that are being alleged, the process crimes, the claims that he's obstructing, all this stuff, right? Which I understand they managed to get some of the information they used in the indictment by piercing attorney-client privilege. So and then taking that and trying to admit that in a court. I guess that doesn't exist anymore, right? Attorney-client privilege doesn't exist if you are a Republican. Everyone else gets it, but Republican politicians that are dangerous to the deep state, it's gone. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, I think so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is any part of the justice system left in America that we can trust.
Yeah.
There seems to be a not just a double, maybe a triple, quadruple, quintuple, sextuple tier system for people who are in fact prosecuted for crime and those who are not. And that does not make for a fair distribution of justice or the equal application of law. And if we don't have the equal application of law, I don't think we have a justice system we can trust, Kevin. I just don't think it. I mean, you take the Trump. Let's just the one that he was arraigned on today. So let's say that Trump didn't do anything wrong and he is convicted. That's bad. Let's say that Trump did do something wrong and he isn't convicted. That's bad. Let's say he didn't do anything wrong and he isn't convicted. That's the correct outcome. Let's say he did something wrong and he is convicted. That's the correct outcome, regardless of the spin. I mean, regardless of any other thing. That's what we expect from a justice system, right? But I'm just not sure that I'm not sure that the outcomes are like that anymore.
Yeah, I don't think anybody believes that system still exists, not at this point. And the other thing is, you said wrong. Actually, it's got to be criminal, because if somebody doesn't like
criminal,
that's
what I meant.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a difference in this case, because there's something called the Presidential Records Act that's meant to govern what a president can and can't do, can and can't have. And the president is actually under Supreme Court precedent, the decider, the arbitrator of what that is he may and may not have, not the National Archives. The National Archives doesn't dictate to the president what it is that he may or may not have. And then in the Presidential Records Act, which governs presidents only, who, of course, it's a civil issue, so it's not a criminal issue. There could be fines if there were truly a violation of that law, but no one's going to jail for that. But they've criminalized an activity. They have tried to charge him with espionage, which is when on a 1917 law designed to make sure that you couldn't take information and give it to an enemy of the United States. Yet they don't allege anywhere in the indictments that was actually done or that there was any chance of that happening. While, as we know, with Hillary Clinton, not only did she, in fact, supply information to people, she was, as James Comey called it, extremely careless, which apparently is not a crime. So if it's not a crime for her, it's not a crime for Trump. But she had a server that easily could have been hacked and the contents taken by nefarious overseas actors, period. So being careless was pretty consequential. If they want to accuse President Trump of being careless or sloppy or not entirely cooperative, those don't sound to me like crimes to go to jail for when there's a Presidential Records Act. You know what there isn't? There isn't a Secretary of State's Records Act. There isn't a U.S. Senator head of the Foreign Services Committee Act. There isn't even a Vice President's Records Act. And so Hillary Clinton had no right to have classified info and do whatever she wanted. Joseph R. Biden, senator, no right to do it. Had it for 10 years plus. And of course, as vice president, he also had no right. And he actually had these materials. So they're going after Trump for something that should be governed under a civil law statute, not criminal.
Right.
And even if you
want to doing that because it's political.
Because it's a political effort, right?
Yeah,
that's right. And I think Tucker Carlson, who also has Fox News going after him, our friend Harmeet Dillon is defending him on a First Amendment basis because Fox News is trying to stop him. They sent a cease and desist saying, stop making your voice heard for free on Twitter. You can't do that. And so she's defending him, and we'll see what happens with this. But this just shows you how important it is to have voices like Tucker Carlson. He came out on his Twitter show and said, whatever else you say about him, Trump is the one guy who actually has a shot at becoming president, who descends from Washington's longstanding pointless war agenda. Dissents, I should say. And for that, the one fact that they're trying to take Trump out before you can vote for him, he says he's a flawed man, but his sins are minor compared to those of his persecutors. I think this is not a prosecution. It is a persecution. And it bodes very negatively for where we end up with as a country if we don't take action.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, that was a swath of news today. I guess we hit all the great news out of Oregon. And but we want to encourage our state senators to keep fighting the good fight. And standing up for what is a very principled stand, both in terms of process and in terms of outcome, and in terms of respecting the voice of the people and the many people who don't feel like they have a stake in the state government anymore. And then, of course, I think we just gave people more reasons to stand up and fight against the corruption that we see in our justice system, our politicized, weaponized justice system, and fight for truth and justice to prevail. At least pray for it if you don't have time to be in the fight, but everybody's got something at stake here, don't they?
They do, yeah. And the Senate Republican walkout is the only bipartisanship that we have in the Oregon legislature.
The negotiations with the Democrats are the only evidence of bipartisanship in existence. That's a very good point. And you wouldn't even know about that if it weren't for the fact that it's a walkout. Crazy, huh?
Crazy, yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us here. David, thanks for being here with me tonight.
Thank you, Kevin.
And it was a blast. And we want to ask everyone to please share this with everyone you can, because there's a lot of people who keep telling us that they don't even hear about this stuff, or they don't have time to see it. Well, they can just spend 3/4 of an hour with us and they pretty much get it all. And they also hear some pretty interesting opinions that tie it all together. So share it widely, and we will see all of you on the next episode of The Captive Audience. I think it should be Sunny and Dawn, I believe, tomorrow night. And everybody have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.